Ambassador Alara Vance had worn the same polite, diplomatic smile for so long that sometimes she feared her face would crack like porcelain if she ever truly expressed what she felt. Today, that mask was particularly heavy as she sat at the massive crystalline table in the grand chamber of Citadel Prime, the gleaming space station that served as the headquarters of the Galactic Concord Council. The circular table, a marvel of alien engineering that seemed to float in the chamber's center, was surrounded by representatives of over 30 sapient species, each seated according to their status in the galactic hierarchy. Humanity's chair was positioned in what the GCC euphemistically called the Developing Members section, alongside other young species who had been fortunate enough to be discovered and guided by the Council's benevolent hand. Alara straightened her blue-gray diplomatic uniform and listened as High Counselor Kale, that's a towering Xylosian with iridescent scaled skin, continued his opening remarks for the 193rd regular session of the GCC. We gather once again to ensure peace and prosperity throughout our shared galaxy. Kale, that's proclaimed, his four arms moving in practiced gestures of inclusion. 5 centuries since the Great Galactic War, the Council has maintained order and guided developing species toward their full potential. Asterisk guided, controlled, exploited. Asterisk Alara kept her thoughts carefully hidden behind her practiced smile. It had been 2 centuries since humanity had been rescued by the GCC from what they claimed was an imminent ecological catastrophe on Earth. 2 centuries of receiving generous technological assistance and protective oversight. 2 centuries of carefully measured advancement, always under the watchful eyes of GCC observers. 2 centuries of having every major human decision scrutinized and approved, or more often, denied, by the Council's regulatory committees. In the private quarters of the Terran Embassy later that evening, Alara poured herself a glass of actual Earth whiskey, a luxury she rarely indulged in. The amber liquid caught the light from the viewport, beyond which the massive arms of Citadel Prime curved gracefully against the backdrop of stars. Captain Jax Marlowe stood by the window, his tall frame silhouetted against the galactic panorama, hands clasped behind his back in a military posture that never quite left him, even in private. "How much longer must we pretend, Ambassador?" Jax asked quietly. Though officially just the commander of her escort vessel, the Vigilant Dawn, he was one of the few people with whom she could speak freely. "Not much longer, Jax," Alara replied, her voice dropping to nearly a whisper despite the embassy's sophisticated anti-surveillance systems. "The vote tomorrow will force our hand." Tomorrow's session would include a vote on Resource Allocation Decree Zeta 9, a new regulation that would grant GCC's corporate mining conglomerates direct access to rare element deposits recently discovered in Earth's Kuiper Belt. The proposal had been introduced with barely any notice, deliberately timed to minimize Earth's ability to build opposition. "Will they really be so brazen?" Jax asked. "They've never needed to be subtle before," Alara said bitterly. "Why start now?" Her secure communication device chimed softly. A message from Earth, encrypted through channels supposedly unknown to GCC intelligence. She recognized the authentication code of the Terran High Command. The message was brief, just 5 words. "Time has come. Silence begins." Alara deleted the message and drained her glass. She had known this day would come eventually. She had spent decades preparing for it. Yet now that it was here, she felt a curious mix of dread and exhilaration. "It's time, Jax," she said simply. "Alert our people. Operation Silence commences tonight." The following morning, Alara arrived at the council session looking no different than any other day. She nodded politely to the representatives she passed, exchanged pleasantries with the Centaurian delegate, and took her seat at the massive table without drawing any particular attention. Kale that's called the session to order, and after some preliminary matters, brought forward Resource Allocation Decree Zeta 9 for voting. As expected, the proposal was presented as a matter of galactic security and shared prosperity. The rare elements in your system's outer regions are essential for new defense technologies that will protect all species, including humans. Kale that's explained in the condescending tone he always used with developing species. The Council's extraction operations will be conducted with the utmost respect for your system's ecological balance. When it was Alara's turn to speak, she delivered a measured objection, citing previous treaties and emphasizing humanity's sovereign rights to resources within their home system. Her words were eloquent, but as expected, largely ignored. The vote proceeded. One by one, the representatives cast their votes through the table's integrated systems. When the final tally appeared in hovering holographic script above the table's center, Alara wasn't surprised. The decree had passed with a substantial majority, with only Earth and two other minor systems opposing. The Council thanks all representatives for their participation, Kale announced, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. Resource Allocation Decree Zeta 9 will take effect in 30 standard days. The Terran Federation will, of course, receive fair compensation as outlined in Section 47 of the proposal. As the session adjourned, several representatives approached Alara with what appeared to be genuine sympathy. The Altarian delegate, a crystalline being whose emotions were visible as colored pulses within their transparent body, showed distinct patterns of concern. Ambassador Vance, they communicated through their translator, please understand that many of us sympathize with Earth's position. Perhaps in time, the Council will reconsider certain aspects. Thank you for your concern, Alara replied with perfect diplomatic courtesy. The Terran Federation will, of course, consider all its options within the framework of galactic law. It was the kind of meaningless diplomatic phrase she had uttered countless times. This time, however, it contained a truth that no one present could possibly comprehend. As she left the chamber, Alara felt the weight of 2 centuries of subjugation in every step. But beneath that weight was a steel core of resolve that had been forged through generations of silent preparation. Earth would consider its options indeed, just not the ones the Council expected. Over the following weeks, a series of seemingly unrelated events began to unfold across Citadel Prime and throughout GCC space. The Terran Embassy decreased its staff by nearly 30%, citing budgetary restructuring and personnel rotation as the primary reasons. Several human-owned businesses on the Citadel's commercial levels began liquidation sales. Human scientists working on collaborative research projects requested extended leave for family obligations or continuing education on Earth. None of these developments, taken individually, seemed particularly alarming. Staffing changes and business closures happen regularly in the vast, complex ecosystem of the galactic community. Only a meticulous observer tracking these specific patterns would notice anything unusual about the gradual reduction in human presence throughout Council space. Fortunately for Alara and her team, the Council's bureaucracy was anything but meticulous when it came to species they considered inferior. In her private office, Alara reviewed the progress reports on her secure terminal. Operation Silence was proceeding exactly according to plan. Phase 1, the quiet extraction of key personnel and assets from Council territories, was nearly 80% complete with minimal detection or interference. A soft chime announced the arrival of Jax Marlowe. The captain entered, holding a datapad with the latest updates from Earth. Project Aquila has moved to final readiness, he reported, his voice barely above a whisper. The last elements will be in position within 17 days. Alara nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and anticipation. Project Aquila, named after the ancient Earth symbol of the eagle, had been humanity's most closely guarded secret for over a century. While outwardly complying with the GCC's restrictions on military and technological development, humanity had been building something extraordinary in the shadows. Hidden research facilities in the Oort cloud and remote nebulae beyond Council monitoring stations. Stealth technology that rendered ships and stations virtually undetectable. Energy weapons and defensive systems developed through ingenious workarounds of Council restrictions. And most importantly, an independent FTL drive system that didn't rely on the Council-controlled hyperspace network. All of this had been accomplished through generations of scientists working in absolute secrecy, their existence unknown even to most of Earth's leadership. Funding had been channeled through thousands of shell corporations and black budget projects. The few council spies who had stumbled across fragments of the project had been carefully fed misinformation or quietly neutralized. Any signs of council suspicion? Alara asked. Minor, Jax replied. A mid-level security analyst has requested information about increased transport traffic between Earth and its colonies. We've provided the standard explanation about preparations for the resource extraction operations. And they believed it. Their arrogance makes them blind, Jack said with a grim smile. They cannot imagine us capable of anything beyond what they permit us to be capable of. That evening, Alara attended a diplomatic reception hosted by the Arcturian delegation. As she circulated through the gathering, engaging in the usual meaningless small talk, she noted how different species interacted with each other. The Council's unofficial hierarchy was plainly visible in these social settings. The elder species, those who had been spacefaring for millennia before the Council's formation, clustered together in exclusive conversations, occasionally bestowing their attention on a middle species representative as a mark of favor. The developing species, humanity included, were expected to show appropriate gratitude for even being included in such prestigious company. Kale that's made his usual grand entrance, flanked by his senior advisors. The High Counselor moved through the reception like a monarch among subjects, graciously acknowledging greetings while never quite treating anyone as an equal. When he approached Alara, she performed the expected diplomatic courtesies. High Counselor, thank you for gracing us with your presence, she said, executing a slight bow. The Terran Federation is honored by your attention. Ambassador Vance, he replied with practiced benevolence. I trust your government has begun preparations for the implementation of Decree Zeta 9. Our extraction corporations are quite eager to begin operations in your system. Indeed, High Counselor, Earth is making all necessary arrangements to comply with the Council's decision. Kale That's' expression shifted subtly to something that, in a human, would have been smug satisfaction. You see, this is why the Council's guidance is so valuable to developing species. Left to your own devices, short-sighted self-interest might prevail. But under our wisdom, you learn to contribute to the greater galactic good. Alara managed to maintain her diplomatic smile. We are constantly learning, High Counselor. Excellent, he said, already turning his attention elsewhere. Your species shows promise, Ambassador. In another century or two, perhaps Earth will be ready for increased responsibilities within the Council structure. As he moved away, Alara exchanged glances with Jax, who stood nearby in his role as her security escort. The captain's eyes reflected her own carefully controlled anger. Another century or two. After 200 years of technological stagnation, resource exploitation, and political subjugation, the Council still viewed humanity as children not ready for a seat at the adults' table. That night, after returning to the embassy, Alara sent a single encoded message back to Earth. Phase 2 authorized. Countdown commences. In the days that followed, the quiet exodus of humanity from Council space accelerated. Human-owned vessels departed from ports throughout GCC territory, citing routine business or personal matters. Terran diplomatic outposts on dozens of worlds began shipping artifacts and archives back to Earth for what was described as digital cataloging and conservation. On Citadel Prime, the Terran embassy continued to function with apparent normalcy, though with a gradually shrinking staff. Alara maintained her regular schedule of meetings and council sessions, giving no indication that anything unusual was occurring. A few mid-level GCC officials began to note the pattern of departures, but their concerns were dismissed by their superiors. The prevailing opinion among council leadership was that humans were simply being petulant about Decree Zeta 9 and would soon accept the inevitability of the council's decision, as they always had before. 22 days after the vote, with only 8 days remaining before the decree would take effect, Alara attended what would be her final council session, though no one else in the chamber knew it. As she listened to the endless procedural discussions and minor policy debates, she felt a strange sense of detachment. For decades, she had played the game of galactic politics, working within a system designed to keep humanity subordinate. Now, knowing what was about to unfold, the proceedings seemed like elaborate theater, a performance of governance that masked the reality of power. When the session concluded, Alara lingered for a moment, looking around the grand chamber. The magnificent view of space beyond the transparent dome ceiling. The ornate symbols of each member species embedded in the chamber walls. The massive table at the center, where the fate of billions was decided by a privileged few. She committed it all to memory, knowing that history was about to take a dramatic turn. That night, the final encrypted message arrived from Earth. All elements in position. Silence falls at dawn. The day decree Zeta 9 was to take effect. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Concord Council was filled to capacity. Representatives from all member species were present, along with a larger-than-usual contingent of galactic media. The implementation of the resource. Extraction rights in the Sol system was seen as a significant economic event, with major corporate interests eager to begin operations. High Counselor Kale that's called the session to order with his usual ceremonial flourish. After preliminary matters, he turned his attention to the Earth delegation's seat, which sat conspicuously empty. A murmur of surprise rippled through the chamber. Ambassador Vance had never missed a session, particularly not one of such importance to her world. It appears the Terran representative is delayed. Kale that's noted with mild irritation. We shall proceed with other matters until Ambassador Vance arrives. But as the session continued, the Earth's seat remained empty. Communications officers discreetly tried to contact the Terran embassy, only to discover that all communication channels were offline. When a security team was dispatched to the embassy premises, they found the doors sealed and no response to their hails. By midday, the situation had escalated from a diplomatic curiosity to a concerning anomaly. Reports began filtering in from across Citadel Prime. The entire human population appeared to have vanished overnight. Businesses, residences, even the small Terran Cultural Center, all abandoned with no explanation. The council session was temporarily suspended as Kale that's convened an emergency meeting with his senior advisors. When they reconvened an hour later, the High Counselor's normally composed demeanor showed signs of strain. The council has received disturbing reports that require our immediate attention, he announced. It appears that Terran citizens have engaged in a coordinated withdrawal from Citadel Prime and potentially from other locations throughout council space. We are investigating the situation and will provide updates as information becomes available. The chamber erupted in a chaos of voices. Representatives demanded explanations, expressed concerns about their own citizens and installations near Terran territories, or speculated wildly about human intentions. By evening, the scale of the situation had become clear, and the initial concern had transformed into genuine alarm. Reports from across GCC space confirmed that humans had disappeared not just from Citadel Prime, but from every council world, station, and outpost. Thousands of human-owned or operated vessels had departed their ports within the same 12-hour period, all citing routine destinations, but none arriving where expected. Most disturbing of all communication with the Sol system had ceased. The hyperspace communication relays that connected Earth to the galactic network had gone silent. Automated trading systems had shut down. The continuous data feeds that had linked humanity to the galaxy for 2 centuries had simply stopped. In the midst of the growing crisis, a junior communications officer burst into the council chamber, interrupting the chaotic session. High Counselor, urgent message from monitoring outpost Sigma 7 near the Sol hyperspace junction. The message was displayed on the chamber's main view screen. The outpost commander, a Rigelian with distinctive purple skin, appeared visibly shaken. Council authorities, we are detecting massive energy signatures consistent with hyperspace inhibitor fields around all known entry points to the Sol system. All approaching vessels are being turned back by automated warning buoys. We have lost contact with our monitoring drones within the system. We await instructions. Kale that's his expression darkened. Hyperspace inhibitor technology was strictly controlled by the Council, supposedly beyond the technological capability of developing species like humans. "This is outrageous," the High Counselor declared. "The Terran Federation has violated multiple Council regulations and treaty obligations. Their actions threaten the stability and security of the galactic community." He turned to his military advisor, a stern Draconian general. "Dispatch Fleet 7 to the Sol system immediately. They are to assess the situation, disable any illegal defensive systems, and re-establish Council authority." As the emergency session continued into the night, news of the human disappearance spread throughout the galaxy. Financial markets plunged as corporations with interests in Terran territories saw their values evaporate. Security forces on dozens of worlds were placed on high alert, though no one could articulate exactly what threat they were guarding against. On the luxury entertainment level of Citadel Prime, a massive viewscreen normally used for sporting events had been repurposed to display news updates. A crowd of citizens from various species gathered, watching with growing unease as reports continued to pour in. The image that would soon become iconic across the galaxy appeared on screen. The empty human chair at the council table, conspicuous in its abandonment. Beneath it, the news ticker read, "The galaxy watches in terror as humanity abandons the table." Fear swept through the galactic community like a contagion. Not fear of attack or aggression, for what could one minor species do against the might of the Council, but fear of the unknown. For 2 centuries, humanity had been a model of a properly integrated developing species, accepting their place in the GCC hierarchy with apparent gratitude. What could have driven them to such a dramatic break with established order? And what did it mean for the carefully maintained stability of the galactic concord? No one knew, and in that uncertainty lay the seeds of terror. Fleet 7, one of the GCC's premier military forces, arrived at the edge of the Sol system 3 days after the human disappearance. Comprising 27 warships of various classes, the fleet represented a substantial display of the Council's military might. Admiral Vexenar, a veteran Draconian commander with scales that had faded from vibrant red to a distinguished gray over his long career, stood on the bridge of his flagship, the indomitable Decree. The massive dreadnought, nearly 2 kilometers in length, led the formation as they approached the invisible boundary where normal space transitioned to the Sol system. "Status report," the Admiral demanded. "Hyperspace inhibitor fields confirmed at all standard entry points, Admiral," his sensor officer reported. "The field appear to be generated by cloaked platforms we cannot precisely locate. Their energy signature exceeds anything in our database for Terran technology." Vexenar frowned. This was already deviating from expectations. The Council intelligence briefing had suggested they would find improvised defenses, perhaps utilizing smuggled technology, but nothing that would pose a serious challenge to a Council fleet. "Proceed at reduced speed. Maintain defensive posture, but weapons systems on standby only. Let's not provoke an incident if it can be avoided." The fleet advanced cautiously into the Sol system, sensors sweeping ahead for any sign of threat. Initial scans showed normal activity around the inner planets, orbital platforms, transport vessels, the expected infrastructure of a moderately advanced civilization. There was no evident military buildup, no apparent preparation for conflict. "This is peculiar," Vexenar muttered. "Where are their defenses? Surely they didn't expect to defy the Council with nothing but hyperspace inhibitors." As the fleet approached Mars orbit, the sensor officer suddenly straightened in alarm. "Admiral, multiple energy spikes detecting throughout the fleet. Some kind of scanning beam, incredibly powerful." Before Vexenar could respond, every system on the bridge flickered simultaneously. Emergency lighting activated, then failed as well, plunging the command center into darkness for several seconds before auxiliary power engaged. "Status report," Vexenar demanded as minimal lighting returned. "All primary systems non-responsive, Admiral," his executive officer reported, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Weapons, shields, propulsion, long-range communications, all offline. We're detecting similar conditions throughout the fleet. Impossible, Vexenair hissed. No EMP weapon could penetrate our shielding. Sir, this wasn't an EMP as we understand it. The science officer interjected. Initial readings suggest some form of targeted quantum field disruption. It's not technology we've encountered before. As the Admiral absorbed this disturbing information, the communications officer called out, Sir, we're receiving a transmission on all frequencies. Origin point. Unclear. On screen, Vexenair ordered. The main view screen flickered to life. One of the few systems still partially functional. For a moment, it showed only stars, then a figure appeared. Not Ambassador Vance, as might have been expected, but a human male in a uniform unlike anything registered in Council databases. The design was sleek, midnight blue with silver accents, bearing insignia that combined Earth's traditional planetary symbol with the silhouette of an eagle. This is Admiral Jax Marlowe of the Terran Freedom Fleet, the man announced, his expression stern but composed. Your vessels have been temporarily neutralized by a targeted quantum disruptor. The effect is non-permanent and will cause no harm to your crews, but your systems will remain offline for approximately 12 hours. Vexenair's scales bristled in shock. Marlowe, the same man who had been Ambassador Vance's escort captain, a mere security officer? In that time, Marlowe continued, you will receive a series of data packets containing information your council has kept from you and the galaxy at large. You will also witness a demonstration that should make the following absolutely clear. The Sol system is now a sovereign territory outside Council jurisdiction. Any further military incursion will be met with proportional response. The transmission ended, and immediately new data began flowing into the fleet's still functioning information systems. Historical records, classified Council documents, evidence of systematic manipulation of developing species, proof that the ecological disaster that had befallen Earth 2 centuries ago had been covertly engineered by Council operatives to make humanity dependent on GCC assistance. But more shocking than the revelations was what happened next. Throughout the fleet, officers and crew rushed to viewports as an impossible sight unfolded before them. Emerging from what appeared to be cloaked positions throughout the system were hundreds of vessels, warships, carriers, support craft, of human design, but incorporating technology that should have been centuries beyond their development level. The Aquila fleet, ships with sleek, predatory lines, bearing the same eagle insignia as Marlowe's uniform. Vessels that dwarfed even the indomitable Decree moved with precision and speed that defied Council military doctrine. Fighters executed maneuvers that should have killed their pilots through G-forces alone. And in the shadow of Jupiter, emerging from the gaseous clouds like a leviathan rising from the deep, came the flagship, a vessel so massive it could only be described as a mobile battle station, bearing the name Terran Liberty on its gleaming hull. From this behemoth, a second transmission was broadcast, not just to Fleet 7, but to every communication system in the galaxy. The face that appeared on screens throughout Council space belonged to a woman who had been believed to be merely a diplomatic functionary for decades. Citizens of the galaxy, Ambassador Ilara Vance began, her diplomatic mask finally set aside to reveal the steel beneath. I speak to you now, not as a Council representative, but as the Supreme Commander of Terra Liberated. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched in stunned silence. For 2 centuries, humanity has endured subjugation disguised as protection. We have watched our resources exploited, our development stifled, our sovereignty denied, all while being told we should be grateful for the Council's guidance. Her expression hardened. That ends today. Humanity has reclaimed its independence and its rightful place among the stars. We seek no conflict, no dominion over others. We desire only what all sentient beings deserve, the freedom to determine our own destiny. The transmission shifted to show irrefutable evidence of the Council's systematic oppression, not just of humans, but of all developing species. Secret protocols for controlling technological advancement. economic structures designed to extract wealth from younger civilizations, historical manipulation to create dependency. The Galactic Concord Council has maintained its power not through wisdom or moral authority, but through deception and control, Vance continued. Today we break those chains and offer others the chance to do the same. The transmission returned to her face, now solemn but resolute. To the Council, do not mistake our withdrawal for weakness or our restraint for fear. The Sol system is now sovereign territory, protected by defenses beyond your current capability to overcome. Any hostile action against human interests will be met with appropriate response. Her expression softened slightly. To those species who have also suffered under Council domination, you are not alone. Terra Liberated offers alliance and assistance to all who seek their rightful independence. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in a state of shocked silence that quickly evolved into chaos. On Citadel Prime, the Council chamber erupted into pandemonium. Representatives of other developing species began questioning their own relationships with the GCC. Elder species representatives demanded immediate military action against Earth. Financial markets collapsed as the implications became clear. And in the midst of it all, High Counselor Kael'thas stared at the empty human chair, finally understanding what it truly represented. Not abandonment, liberation. In the months that followed what galactic historians would later call the Terran Revelation, a new reality slowly crystallized across known space. The initial shock gave way to practical adjustments as various powers came to terms with humanity's dramatic transformation from subjugated species to independent force. The Galactic Concord Council, after heated internal debate and failed attempts to rally military support for a punitive expedition against Earth, eventually adopted a policy they termed strategic containment, essentially a face-saving way to acknowledge they could not force humanity back into the fold. Fleet 7 had returned to Council space with their pride wounded, but their vessels intact, bearing data that could not be suppressed despite the GCC's best efforts. Admiral Vexar, deeply affected by what he had witnessed and learned, became an unlikely voice for reform within the Council military structure. The Sol system, now formally declared the Terran Exclusion Zone, established clear boundaries that extended well beyond traditional planetary orbits. Massive defense platforms materialized at strategic points, incorporating technology that remained mysterious to outside observers. Trade routes were cautiously re-established, but under strictly controlled conditions and primarily with non-Council worlds or those species showing independence from GCC authority. On Citadel Prime, the Council chamber had been physically reorganized, the empty human chair removed entirely, as if to erase the embarrassing reminder of the GCC's failure. High Counselor Kael'thas, though still in power, had seen his authority dramatically diminished. The previously unquestioned hierarchy had been severely undermined. 6 months after the revelation, a new diplomatic initiative emerged from Earth. Not ambassadors seeking reintegration, as some in the Council had hoped, but representatives of what now called itself the Terran Free Alliance, operating from a newly constructed diplomatic station at the edge of the exclusion zone. The station, named New Horizon, became the focal point for a growing network of relationships between humanity and other species disillusioned with Council governance. These were primarily other developing species, but also included some mid-tier powers who saw opportunity in the changing galactic order. Alara Vance, now officially bearing the title of High Commander of External Relations, arrived at New Horizon for the inaugural diplomatic conference with 12 non-Council worlds. Her shuttle docked at the gleaming facility, a marvel of human engineering that subtly demonstrated their technological advancement without appearing overtly militaristic. As she walked through the station's central promenade, she noted how different this environment was from Citadel Prime. Where the Council headquarters emphasized hierarchy and tradition, New Horizon was designed for equality and transparency. The conference chamber featured a truly circular table, with no position more prominent than others. Quite different from the old arrangement, observed a familiar voice. Alara turned to find Admiral Jax Marlowe, no longer playing the role of security escort, but standing as her equal in the new power structure. His uniform, like hers, now openly displayed the eagle insignia of the Free Alliance. "That's rather the point," she replied with a smile that, for the first time in decades, felt genuine. No more pretending to accept a lesser place at someone else's table. "The Council has sent observers," Jax noted, gesturing subtly toward a group of beings on the far side of the promenade. "Not official representatives, of course, that would acknowledge our legitimacy, but independent analysts who will report back." "Let them observe," Ilaris said. "Transparency serves our purposes now." The conference proved more successful than even its organizers had anticipated. The participating worlds, freed from Council pressure by humanity's protective umbrella, engaged in genuine cooperation on trade, cultural exchange, and mutual defense. Preliminary agreements were reached on technology sharing, conducted ethically, without the exploitative restrictions the GCC had always imposed. News of these developments spread rapidly through galactic information networks, further undermining the Council's narrative that humanity had become a dangerous, destabilizing force. Instead, many began to see the Terran Free Alliance as a potential alternative to a system that had grown corrupt and self-serving. Not all reactions were positive, of course. The Council's elder species, those who had benefited most from the old order, regarded the emerging alliance with undisguised hostility. Military posturing along the borders of Allied space became common. Economic sanctions were attempted, though their effectiveness was limited by the growing network of independent trade relationships. More concerning were the covert operations, sabotage attempts, assassination plots, and propaganda campaigns designed to sow discord among the Allied worlds. The GCC, while publicly maintaining a stance of diplomatic engagement, was clearly unwilling to relinquish its dominance without resistance. 1 year after the revelation, Alara and Jax stood in the observation dome of New Horizon, watching as ships from 27 formerly subjugated worlds participated in the first joint training exercise of the newly formalized Mutual Defense Compact. The vessels, some advanced, others more modest, maneuvered in complex formations, protected by a perimeter of Terran warships. "They're learning quickly," Jax observed. "Another year, and they won't need our protection to stand against Council intimidation." "That was always the goal," Alara replied. "Not to replace the Council's dominance with our own, but to create space for genuine self-determination." "Do you think there will be war?" Jax asked quietly, giving voice to the question that haunted many. Alara considered the question carefully. "Not full-scale, not yet. The Council has lost too much credibility to rally sufficient forces, and we've been careful not to present ourselves as aggressors. But skirmishes, proxy conflicts, those are inevitable." She turned from the viewport to face him directly. "The greater danger is that in defending ourselves against the Council, we become what we fought against. Power, even wielded with the best intentions, has a way of corrupting." "Speaking of power," Jax said, "there's been another request from the ACP worlds for advanced weapons technology. They're concerned about Council militia activity near their borders." The Association of Carillion Trade Planets was among the newest additions to their alliance, a group of resource-rich worlds that had suffered particularly exploitative treatment under Council oversight. Defensive systems only, for now, Alara decided after a moment's thought. Help them establish proper training protocols and command structures first. Weapons without wisdom lead only to destruction. Jax nodded in agreement. "I'll see to it personally." As he departed, Alara remained in the observation dome, her thoughts turning to the journey that had brought humanity to this point. The centuries of quiet preparation, the careful cultivation of a facade of compliance while building strength in secret, the risks taken by generations of humans who had devoted their lives to a freedom they might never live to see. The price had been high: isolation, deception, and now the constant vigilance required to maintain their hard-won independence. But looking at the fleet of Allied ships training together in the space beyond the station, she could not doubt it had been worth paying. A soft chime announced another visitor. Alara turned to see a junior diplomatic officer, clearly nervous to be addressing the High Commander directly. "Forgive the interruption, Commander, but there's a situation developing that requires your attention." "Go on," Alara encouraged. "We've received a communication from the Council, not through official channels, but through a private diplomatic back channel. It appears to be from a faction within the GCC that disagrees with the current leadership. They're requesting a secret meeting to discuss possibilities." Alara raised an eyebrow. "Reform-minded council members reaching out? Interesting. What specifically are they proposing?" "They're vague, naturally, but the implications suggest discussion of a restructured galactic governance system, one with greater representation for all species and genuine checks on centralized power." Alara felt a flicker of cautious hope. Perhaps the revelation had catalyzed change more profound than they had dared to imagine. Change within the council itself. "Arrange the meeting," she decided. "Maximum security protocols, neutral location, and Jax should be present." As the officer departed to make arrangements, Alara returned her gaze to the stars beyond the viewport. The galaxy was entering an uncertain era, the stable but oppressive order of the past 5 centuries giving way to something new and undefined. For some, that uncertainty bred fear. Fear of conflict, fear of loss, fear of a future without the familiar structures of the past. The iconic image of humanity's empty council chair had become a powerful symbol across the galaxy, reproduced in art, media, and political discourse, interpreted as liberation by some, as dangerous chaos by others. But for Alara, the uncertainty held promise. The chance to build something better than what had come before. Not perfect, certainly, nothing created by imperfect beings could be, but perhaps more just, more free. 2 days later, Alara and Jax prepared to depart for the secret meeting with the council faction. Their shuttle was being readied as they conducted a final security briefing with their team. "Is it a trap?" Jax asked bluntly as they walked toward the landing bay. "Possibly," Alara conceded, "but it's also an opportunity we can't ignore. If there's a chance for a peaceful resolution, for a new equilibrium that respects the dignity of all species, we must pursue it." Jax nodded, though his expression remained vigilant. The galaxy watched in terror as humanity abandoned the table. He quoted the now famous media headline, "Perhaps they'll watch with hope as we help build a new one." Alara smiled at the sentiment. "I prefer they watched with understanding. Terror and hope are both too volatile to build a future upon." As their shuttle departed from New Horizon, Alara gazed back at the station, a small point of light among countless stars, yet representing something profound, the capacity for change, for growth, for self-determination. Whether the galaxy's future held conflict or cooperation remained to be seen, but humanity would face it standing tall, not kneeling in submission. The empty chair had served its purpose. It was time to see what might be built in its place.